Joining me on the programme now, royal commentator Emily Andrews. I'm also joined by Errol McKellar, a prostate cancer survivor and campaigner extraordinaire. Let me start with Errol on this one, because Errol, I think what's been happening today really, I think pretty much all over the world, is a sort of outpouring of gratitude towards His Majesty the King for being so candid, so
Yeah.
honest, for, not just simply saying, oh, my medical issues are my own private concern, but saying, this is what I've got, an enlarged prostate gland. This is what I'm going to do. I'm having a procedure to rectify it, and effectively inspiring other men to go ahead and do the same. And I hear that it's been Googled. The word prostate has never been so comprehensively and extensively Googled. Tell me how, from the Errol McKellar Foundation, you're feeling about all of this.
You know what, Vanessa? Listen, thank you for having me on as always. And listen, really, really proud of our king, right, for going public on this because, you know, unfortunately, you need somebody high profile to remind people of the seriousness of this particular issue. And for him to go public on it, listen, absolutely brilliant. On behalf of the Errol McKellar Foundation and everyone involved, we want to thank him personally for doing this because it just helps to get this message out even more that, prostate issues doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your wealth. And it certainly will, if you ignore it, it will kill you. So the fact that he is showing, look, whatever the situation is, if it's treated and dealt with early, it's treatable.
Errol, as we know, there are going to be men watching
Yeah,
this, thinking to themselves what I know that you thought to yourself, because we've discussed this many, many times on many, many shows, which
yeah,
is, it's that embarrassing bit of my anatomy. I
yeah.
really don't fancy going anywhere near a doctor. I think that whatever they do to examine me might be totally embarrassing, incredibly painful. I just don't really want to go there. And so what if I get up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the night to pee? So what if I never quite know whether my bladder's empty or not? So what if I dribble a bit afterwards? So what if I've got a weird pain going on down there? I think I'll just keep stum, keep it to myself, ignore the whole thing, and hope that it will go away. So you tell me, that's what you're on the show for really today. That's why we're always talking to you, Errol, is so that you explain why that is just not a good idea to
No,
do.
please, please, ladies and gentlemen, please, particularly ladies, right? Encourage your men, encourage your husbands, your partners, your brothers, every man that you know, ladies, encourage all of those men to go and get a yearly PSA check. Right, it's an MOT yourself. We call it an MOT yourself with our foundation, and the reason why it's just as important, if not more important, right, than the motor car that you drive, that you have to have an MOT on every year, right? 10 minutes, that's all it's going to take, right? There is not a reason for men not to go and do this. And listen, if men are squeamish about this, you try being a woman and see what women have to go through every day.
Luckily, you never do have to do that, Errol. You're never going to have to experience what we experience. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Emily, just 1 minute. But I do want Errol to be honest about this in the same way that the King is being honest about this. You didn't fancy going to the doctor yourself, did you? You're here telling everyone else what they should do and telling them it's only 10 minutes and it's only a PSA test. It's just like having your car MOT'd. But you didn't fancy going. So tell me, number one, who is the woman that we have to thank for seeing your lovely
Sharon,
face smiling at me today? Because you wouldn't be here if she hadn't made you go. And
you know
and
what,
and
Vanessa?
who is she?
I
Tell
knew
us.
you were going to do this to me. I knew you was going to do this to me. And I have to say, I would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for my wife, Sharon.
Yeah.
Right? Sharon complained about my snoring, which has got nothing to do with prostate cancer. But because of her insistence of me doing something about the snoring, I went and got a checkup with the doctor about the snoring, picked up a leaflet because I turned to her and I said to her, look, if this snoring bothers you that much, you make an appointment with the doctor. And she made it. And I went, sat there, picked up the leaflet, read the leaflet, decided to go to the reception and say to the lady, can I make an appointment to come back to do this test? The lady said, Mr. McKellar, it's a simple blood test and it takes less than 10 minutes. Little did I think that 10 minutes was going to change the rest of my life. It did. So, and what's ironic about this is that since we started the charity and we have our number of sit and talk groups and we do our walk and talk, as you know, Vanessa,
Mm.
right? The amount of women that have encouraged men to go and get themselves tested, right? We've lost count on that, because this is how this relationship is so important. When a man goes through the prostate issues, There isn't a man that deals with it on his own.
Errol, a pleasure having you on the show. And as I always say, give my love to the wonderful Sharon, because she's the one we have to thank for seeing you at all. So thank you very much indeed. Let me go
Thank
to Emily
you.
Andrews. Now, Emily, we don't normally begin, do we, a conversation about the royal family by discussing in great detail Errol McKellar's prostate. And we don't normally get to talk about the king's prostate gland either. I mean, the sceptre, the orb, it's not something we normally focus on. However, the king, and I think, as Errol says, generously and wisely, because he's a sagacious man and he does think about other people, has decided this is not the one to be private about.
Absolutely, and I love that use of sagacious. Actually, Charles has always been quite public about his health and about public matters in comparison, actually, to his mother, late Queen Elizabeth, who was very, very private about health. She was very cautious about any kind of public information that was released. I think partly because she viewed that monarchy was above human frailty. I mean, these kind of public health issues, both the Princess of Wales and the King, does make us rather kind of question that unshakable institution of the firm. But I think good on Prince Charles for being so transparent and telling everybody, men, go and get your prostate checked. 20 years ago, he fronted a campaign about bowel cancer. And he wrote, I mean, I was looking at it earlier, he wrote a very moving piece in 2000 saying, I think one of the problems is that us British are a little bit embarrassed about talking about the private parts of our body. So like other things, like the environment, like, sartorial natures, clothes, Charles is kind of almost ahead of the curve, telling us to, not be embarrassed about our private parts and make sure we get all of this checked. And indeed, as you say, Vanessa, that's why Buckingham Palace was so open about the problems that he's facing and the fact he's going to undergo this small procedure next week.
Absolutely. So I was talking to Sarah Houston, as you heard there, about the kind of, I suppose, the structure of the royal family when we have this very rare and unusual situation whereby the top three are hors de combat. They're out of commission. William's looking after Kate. Kate's obviously not able to work. The king is having this procedure and operation. He's got to recover. Camilla being very robust as usual, saying he's absolutely fine. I can't wait to get back to work as soon as it's over. But we do have a rather antiquated lot who are left to take over, haven't we? With the exception of Edward and Sophie, who are still in their late 50s.
Absolutely. And I don't want to be ageist, but this health issue of Charles in particular coming at the same time, which I'm told is entirely coincidental, by the way, the announcement of Charles's procedure next week on the same day as the Princess of Wales was announced that she'd actually undergone the operation. It does remind us that we have another aging monarch. Charles is going to be 76 this year. And I do think that the transition from one monarch to another, from mother to son, has been managed very well. Before Charles became king, he was the longest serving Prince of Wales. We had the longest serving monarch in the Queen. And many people, including courtiers, frankly, whispered to me privately that they were fearful of the change of reign because that is when instability can occur and unpopularity and, popularity polls dip. But I do think that the palace and Charles has managed that transition very well. But this, as you talked about with Sarah, we do have an aging royal family. We have an aging monarch. And it's all very well talking about a slimmed down monarchy. But when you have the Prince and Princess of Wales out of action, two of the biggest stars, plus the King spending a night in hospital, with only kind of the fourth member, the Queen Camilla, literally holding the royal fort, you have to kind of wonder where Charles, and with the help of William, where his strategic direction, where he's thinking of taking the modern royal family. The Queen's MO, her modus operandi, was to have a number of members of her family representing her, taking on many charities, taking on many public engagements, having public positions, colonels in chief of various army regiments or positions in the Navy and the Air Force. Frankly, Charles does not have the personnel. And so I think in this period of 8 years, or even longer, frankly, before Prince George, he's only 10, he's not going to do public duties until perhaps he's 18 or even 21 or 22 if he goes to university. I think Charles and William have got a real decision to be made about what sort of royal family and what sort of institution they want to be. Are they going to look back to the Queen? And as you and Sarah talked about before, maybe Mike and Zara get the call up. I doubt it, but wouldn't that be amazing? Or Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice? Or are they going to adhere more to the European model, which is what Charles always said, of bicycling monarchs and very few members of the royal family, to try and keep that sort of taxpayer burden down?
Emily, thank you. Always a pleasure.